actually prepared to take the NERC recycled content webinar this morning to find out that it's also starting at 11 o'clock.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
Heidi, you connected?
Yep, I'm in.
Okay. Well, as I just said, I'm not one to wait, so it is 9:01 on my clock. So let's begin with this meeting, and I think we start with a roll call.
Notepad.
I will, as soon as I pull in my agenda, sorry.
Sorry, John, are you waiting for me to do something?
Pardon?
Pens. Highlighter pencils.
Okay, well, let me do a quick roll call. Committee member Medrano.
I'm here.
He's here, okay. And just in time. Committee member Potashner. Committee member Sanborn.
I'm here.
Committee member Schneider.
Present.
Committee member Toyota.
I'm here.
And I'm seeing on my screen that Mr. Potashner is logging in, so we'll add him when he appears. So the purpose, I think, today is to do two things. If you recall, in our last meeting, we went through a series of recommendations that were kind of bulleted items, short items to prompt discussion. I think we had 67 of them. We finished about 16, so close to a quarter of the recommendations, but they were grouped along two agency programs, and one of those agencies being Cal EPA, and the other GOBIZ, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. So
No. Stop with the clause.
Member Potashner's joined us. Good morning. So following our discussion of those bulleted items, the two subcommittees worked on developing narrative to further explain the items that we had discussed and refine the items based on the notes that we had taken. So today we're going to be looking at both the narrative that was derived from last week's meeting and then hopefully move on to the next set of bulleted recommendations so we can continue to develop the narrative. If we're satisfied with the narrative that it's sufficient to forward to the commission meeting, then we can do that, the next commission meeting being tomorrow. So that's the intent, that we work from the short bulleted recommendations to a fuller narrative to recommendations to the commission, and just continue this process till we work our way through or run out of time. So, with that in mind, I guess if I need to call for any public comments, is that yeah. So do we have any public comments for items not on the agenda?
We do. We have two public, well, sorry, I'm looking at this subject line. I believe there's a, Chair, how would you like me to handle? There's one comment with this subject policy recommendations. Would you like to hold to that agenda item, or should I speak to that one now?
Well, why don't you go ahead and review it now? Let's see what.
Okay. And I'm trying to, it's a little longer than 150, I believe. Let me, sorry. Hold on while I get my bearings. Okay, this comment is from Gail Rice Green. These comments are submitted as a representative of XT Green, not as a member of the California Carpet Stewardship Advisory Committee. I've submitted similar comments to the Recycling Committee, but wanted to include them in this committee's focus on carpet. XT Green has developed and patented an advanced manufacturing technology to recover high-value resources from PCC. Due to delays beyond our control, the construction of the XT Green facility in Rancho Cucamonga has been delayed. The company is now ready to move forward, but may not due to concerns regarding the availability of PCC collected in California to process. This concern has also been voiced independently by other carpet processors. CARE has made major progress in the carpet stewardship program and has been working to solve the collection problem. However, the following 5 policy ideas to increase PCC collection in California are beyond their current legislative authority. Item 1, require carpet retailers / contractors that generate 4 cubic yard or more of PCC / commercial waste per week to arrange for recycling services to comply with the California mandatory commercial recycling regulations. Item 2, change the construction and demolitions C&D regulations to increase the amount of PCC recycled from C&D projects by establishing diversion rate requirements for PCC and other materials hazardous in landfills like drywall and manufactured wood that are separate from the diversion requirements of high weight inert materials such as concrete. It goes on. I have published this comment because it's more than 150 words. So that's Gail Bryce's comment. Those will be in the meeting notes and that has been published. She has 2 more items she talks about. The second comment is from Randy Pollock. Sorry, getting the right one. Yes, Randy Pollock from Churchwell White. He says, on Monday, September 21st, I made a comment to the Marketing Development Committee regarding the CARE program and the importance of hearing from a CARE representative if there were questions about the program. I would like to clarify that my comment was made on behalf of the Carpet and Rug Institute, who works with the program and is a member of the Carpet Stewardship Advisory Committee. Thank you. Again, that has been published, and those are the only comments at this time.
Right. Yeah, so we'll take those comments and move to the next agenda item, which is the minutes or meeting notes from our September 21st meeting. And I would ask if anybody has any changes they'd like to recommend to those notes. Mr. Patashnik?
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought you were raising your hand. All right, not hearing any or seeing any requests for changes.
I'll move to approve.
Is the chat box open? I don't think the chat is open.
It's not.
Okay, you can't see that. Let me try to, Audrey, I think Audrey's here. Can you help me with that? I never tried enabling. Oh, the chat box.
There it is.
Okay,
Got it.
thank you.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. So I'm not seeing any suggested revisions or requests to speak. So let's just do a
Approve them.
motion. Motion Sanborn. For a second.
I'll second it.
Second Toyota. Okay, let me go through the roll call, starting with Mr. Medrano.
Yes.
Patashner. Looks like a yes. Sanborn.
Aye.
Schneider. Yes, and Toyota.
Yes.
Davis, yes. So, all right, we can move on. And I think we're at, sorry, I'm moving to my agenda. Yeah, so this is the priorities and recommendations based on material type or program. So this would be the list that was sent out.
Do you want me to bring that up, Chair Davis?
Yeah, there's 2 lists. So let me ask, do you want to go over the narrative that you received? that apparently was not is not on the website. So, Kate, you would have to just bring up the
Okay.
narrative.
Sure.
So again, this was derived from our discussion of the bulleted list of program and goal priorities from the last meeting. And just a reminder, we have two subcommittees. I'm a member of both subcommittees, along with Mr. Medrano as one subcommittee and Ms. Toyota as the other. We focused generally, community member Toyota and I focused on the goals, what were identified as goals, and then community member Medrano and I focused on what were the program priorities. We then developed narrative and kind of to support the two discussions. The subcommittee work had been merged, and so what we started with is, first of all, an explanation of the narrative that it's prepared after the committee discusses recommendations and will be updated with additional recommendations following each committee meeting. The updated narrative will be forwarded to full commission consideration. So the first descriptive paragraph or narrative paragraph is just the relationship between recycling market development, being the interface between the private investment and public incentives, where basically what we're doing statewide with local initiatives is to create supplies of material, giving us commodity feedstock for manufacturing and for land application, but that the investment risks is reflected about the ability to sustain material supplies or increase those supplies, what the demand for the recovered feedstocks might be, the cost to permit, construct, and operate compared to alternative locations, and I guess the demand for recovered feedstocks would also include the value of those feedstocks. So it just tries to put what we're doing in the framework of traditional economic development around this interface between the collection and processing activities and demand for materials. Second paragraph focuses on the goal to increase market demand for materials that can be met not only by assuring ongoing supplies and high-quality feedstocks, but by moderating investment risk for environmental entrepreneurs, so that it's not, we need to make sure that we can build the infrastructure we want by helping overcome the obstacles to building that infrastructure. Providing the supply is the first step, obviously, but we need to help create that demand and utilization of the materials. And then we dive into the facility siting issues, which we've heard from many different times or from many different sources that permitting both local, state, and regional is an issue, and that coordinating those permits needs improvement if California is to meet its recycling goals. Those improvements need not involve new legislation. So the recommendations are instead focused on immediate removal of barriers and overcoming administrative obstacles. There's a section in the Public Resources Code, 71,000, begins at 71,000. It actually is a 1993 act, the Environmental Protection Permit Reform Act of 1993, that allows a permit applicant to request that one state agency coordinate all state environmental permits, including permits issued by regional water boards and air pollution control districts. So it's referred to as the consolidated permit process, and the detail begins at the Public Resources Code, section 71020. So the recommendations that we discussed last time around this Cal EPA permit process form the first group of recommendations intended to improve performance, to accelerate worthy project permits by streamlining processes between GoBiz, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, Cali PA, Cal Recycle, State and Regional Water Boards, Air Resources Board, Air Quality Management District, local government, and other affected state or local agencies. And I think it was the inclusion of the local government aspect that became clear in our discussions at our last meeting. It needs to be a part of this.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing some of you when you drop your voice. Could you make sure you speak?
I'm increasing my voice. I'll try to keep moist. Since we haven't sent this around, I think it's important to kind of go read through it a little bit. I think what we discussed last time was focusing on significant projects, not trying to dial down to every possible project. And I think we were looking for ways to better define significant. So the first bullet following our discussion last time would be that significant impacts would optimize facility throughput and be geographically distributed as needed to serve local and regional markets. And we're focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So both recycling projects and organics management projects do that. A significant project would kind of be of an optimal size within different local and geographic regions. So what's significant in the northern rural counties may be different than what's significant in the LA area or the Bay Area. But nonetheless, we would try to involve local permitting agencies in the process at the project developer's request and include local requirements and timelines so that things are more fully integrated as far as the process, consolidating the process, and also sharing project knowledge. When, one of the interests for this committee was to try to induce paper pulping operations. Those would be brand new to everybody in California. And as we know, every time you bring a compost project or an AD project to a local government, it's likely to be the first time they've dealt with a project like that. So sharing information across from all the agencies seems to be something that'd be worthwhile. Third item, to use that consolidated permit application and development agreements to set out conditions needed to complete the permits. We talked a little bit about development agreements last time. They try to lock in what's required on the project, and so the rules don't change. The goalpost doesn't constantly move, and the cost of the project it's clearly understood up front to the developer. The fourth item would be to require permit completion within the stated completion dates, which is consistent with the Consolidated Permit Act, provided the project development proceeds as agreed in the process, which is sometimes part of the issue. We hear about delays, but the delays aren't always at the permit agency. It could be delays in moving forward on the developer's end. The fifth one, I think, was an important consideration to undertake pilot projects now. Try to figure out how this would work by actually focusing attention on specific projects, both recycling and organics management projects. Then designating a lead Cali PA contract or contact for the projects, so we know who to go to. Right now, I did find a pathway on the Cali PA side, and it takes to the office of the ombudsman. And it's not likely to be the person who's going to handle this. So we want to know, who are we going to work with? The alternative would be to work with GoBiz, who has a permit assistance branch, and I think that may be another way to access and convene the process and allow GoBiz to work with Cali PA to do so. Another recommendation would be to authorize Cal Recycle to initiate the process for projects within its purview. Again, it's just how do we get this thing started? We've yet to find an example of a real project where are we now? 17 years. And so seems to be an issue about how to initiate it. Then the next sets of recommendations kind of move away from that focus on Cali, PA. So it's probably good to stop at number 7 before we move into the kind of general plan and zoning issues. See if anybody has any response, anything you'd like to discuss, modify, improve. All right. Not hearing any. Again, the goal today, if we're comfortable, is to move recommendations forward to the commission. And we'll have obviously at the commission there'll be a chance to discuss these again. But it would be good for the community to be at least somewhat on the same page. Committee Member Schneider.
I'm just wondering, we're looking at greenhouse gas generation, but I'm wondering if we want to address traffic.
I think that's going to be one of the local government issues. The greenhouse gas impacts of moving materials are generally, well, they're included in the emission reduction factors. So, and we do have some recommendations around the emission reduction factors coming up. And I think if you dig into the detail of the way that you measure greenhouse gas impacts, particularly using ARB's numbers, the transportation impacts around that are specified in a general sense, but obviously the local impacts are going to be a land use issue for local government.
And I'm still trying to wrap my head around, to me, you mentioned something that in my new world are developer agreements. If we might be able to standardize some of the issues between local government and a reuse or recycling based businesses coming in and do it in the form of a developer agreement. And this is the first time I thought about it. But
yeah, I think that's kind of what we had in mind, that we can bring different knowledge to the discussion and maybe come up with some language that could be used, in other applications in other areas. But,
cool.
So the idea of doing the pilot projects is to maybe focus on different scale projects, different geographic locations, and try to learn from that as we go forward.
Thank you.
Okay, so we can move on to the next.
Actually, I had my hand raised.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. It's hard to see. I know the feeling. First, thanks for putting this all together. We just got this email a couple days ago. This hasn't been posted publicly, so people cannot follow what we're doing or really have time to comment. And I would not be comfortable moving this to the full commission until I'm really sure all of us and the public have had a time at the committee level to really dig in to this. And it's unfortunate what's happening with the law that passed in 2017 on accessibility, because the intent was so good. But as I'll say tomorrow at the commission meeting, it is really getting in the way of our actually making things accessible to the public. And if it's not in a very explicit format and all of this, CalRecycle is not legally allowed to post it, which is getting in the way of the public following us and being able to make things public. So unfortunately, I just don't feel like this is ready to go to the full commission as a done deal until the public has seen it, had time to digest it and comment on it, because it's just been emailed to us in this little group just a few days ago. So I don't know if I'm the only one who feels that way, but I'm beyond frustrated with the law the way it is. And believe us, we're not the only ones in this position. Apparently, state agencies are pulling down documents that are upsetting a whole bunch of groups because they're not meeting accessibility requirements. And other committees and advisory committees are having to email documents out to the public because it can't go through CalRecycle because it's not legal to post. The time it's taking CalRecycle to post these things is outrageous. If we send it to them, even if it's formatted correctly, when they PDF it, it messes the formatting up and then they have to redo it again. It's taking them hours. So I'm just putting it out there for the public to understand. If you're frustrated with not being able to see stuff beforehand, we feel you and we're sorry. But this is the law. We have to follow it. And we're doing our very best. But I do think it's going to slow us down because at this point we can't, unless it's, posted a few days in advance of the meeting, nobody's seeing this except for the first time in the public sphere. And then I'm worried that things get to the commission when they're not fully vetted, and then the commission meetings get bogged down with very long public comments because they really didn't know how to comment at the committee level. So I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, so one option would be to do like the recycling committee did at the last full commission meeting, which is to give a report, and that report could be to go through this, and then following our next committee meeting, the proper posting of the documents, and then we could bring the recommendations forward.
I'd be very comfortable with that.
Yeah, and then we're not coming in totally cold to the commission. They will have at least seen this, and as we did with the recycling committee the last meeting. Okay.
Then if we adopt it today to move to the commission tomorrow, it would be that it's not that it's fully vetted or because of the public comment thing, that we're just bringing it to the commission to give us some early feedback, and then we at the committee would take this back up again after the public has had more time to see it and the commission has had a little time to see it, and we can rejigger it if we want to, or just leave it exactly the same. But at least that way it's had more time to settle with people. Yeah,
and I think the other thing that we talk about at the full commission meeting is the adoption of 2274, 47, whichever the bill was. It gives preliminary recommendations by the end of the year, and then final recommendations with input by July. So, I certainly view any of this as preliminary. We're going to be revisiting it, and we can talk about how to refine these. But, I think that's another big change in the last week. Okay, well, given that, let's still go through it and any suggestions of how we might improve this would be appropriate. So the Office of Planning and Research is one of the agencies that's mentioned in the lead narrative. They issue general plan guidelines. I think we received some follow-up from Kara Morgan after the CalRecycle's presentation at our last meeting, and she included a good lengthy description of what resulted from a project that CalRecycle funded with Institute of Local Government a few years ago. So station number 8 is kind of a follow-up. Kate, if you want to scroll down. There we go. Yeah, actually it's 7. I was wrong. There's one more.
Sorry, where do you, oh, I apologize. Oh, I'm moving things. My bad.
Wrong document.
Let me, this one, sorry.
Yeah.
Where would you like me to go on it, John?
To 7, number 7.
Okay, sorry about that. There you go.
No, I was right. You were right. It is number 8. All right. So these general plan guidelines are from Office of Planning and Research, and they were updated pretty significantly from particularly around the land use element to encourage and facilitate recycling and composting facilities. I think what I heard in the last meeting was to update those guidelines to address discriminatory standards for reuse, repair, and recycling facilities. The original language included recycling manufacturing. The Institute of Local Government project, the IOG project, was focused on local government land use policies around organics facilities, so it misses some of the opportunities on recycling manufacturing. And then we brought up reuse, repair, and recycling facilities as well. I know there have been issues with CRB, buyback operations in some communities. So if you have a chance to look at the general plan guidelines, you'll see that we could probably suggest some specific language, but at least as a broad recommendation would be to update those and focus on other areas. And then there is a general plan economic development guideline. And so clearly from market development standpoint, there's advantages, particularly on the circular economy, green economy, to include recycling-based manufacturing and organics processing, which are not called out in economic development guidance, and nor are they called out in the climate change, which is, I think, really important for us under SB 1383. So, those three recommendations are focused on the OPR documents and trying to address some of the land use concerns that I heard last time. There was also mention of zoning, and zoning is a little more difficult because zoning is really the drill down from the general plan language. And so I don't have a specific recommendation about how to address zoning in here, but I think if you have allowable uses under the general plan, then the zoning follows in order. So what's next, Kate?
Going down. There you go. Is that fine?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, it's not shared.
Yeah.
19.
Okay, and then lastly, there's the OPR also issues CEQA guidance, which is really convoluted document to understand, but I think the key here is to try to call out the positive greenhouse gas impacts from recycling-based manufacturing and organics management, so that we know that they're looked at during the CEQA review on projects, particularly the large-scale review or even the initial studies. And so that's just, again, another broad recommendation without specific language at this point. So we can move on if you're comfortable. The next set of recommendations have to do with GOBIZ, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. The language explaining the office is really just a paraphrase from their website, but they do a lot of direct assistance to businesses. I think we heard from CalRecycle's presentation at our last meeting that they do work closely with GOBIZ, and GOBIZ is involved along with providing incentives and directing businesses to those incentives, financing, tax credits, and other incentives, job training. They work on site selection, assistance with permitting and regulatory compliance, and also foreign investment and export opportunities, which seem to still be a part of our world. So number 12, and we're trying to figure out why the indentation happened on the double spacing. It looks like it's just a formatting issue. We'll try to resolve it going forward. So the idea would be to have a specific GOBIZ contact, someone that zone administrators like Manuel and I could refer. Maybe somebody looking at GOBIZ site might be able to quickly find somebody who's familiar with our issues around recycling manufacturing and organics management. Again, it's getting entree to the assistance that's out there. CalGold has a search. CalGold is the business entree on their website, where you put in the type of business that you have, and then they call up the various incentives and assistance that GOBIZ can provide around those businesses. But our businesses are not included in there. Repair business, organics, here you're a compost operator and you put compost in there, nothing shows up. So we want to be able to make it easier by having that access to their permit assistance tool. Get somebody from GoBiz on the consolidated permitting and be a part of that from the governor's office. It both elevates it and maybe helps cut across some of the interagency boundaries. Number 15, almost there. Yeah. These two items that came out of the subcommittee were to have investment opportunities for reuse, repair, recycling, manufacturing, organic waste management projects by doing events, something that GoBiz sponsors focused events around topics, and also creating innovation hubs. We had some initial ideas around research and development, trying to stimulate new ideas, appropriate applications around our industries. And then the last recommendation in this initial narrative set is to share job development and training assistance, including a focus on environmental justice, communities with CalRecycle identified businesses. So the EnviroScreen is Cal EPA online mapping technology that combines economic factors with environmental issues, and Committee Member Sanborn, you can hand it.
Yeah, thank you. So going back to 16, if you would. Yeah, so some of these are very, very general, like creating an innovation hub. What is an innovation hub? Who's going to create it? Who's going to oversee competitions? Anytime the state has to do something, there's a cost associated with it, and somebody has to pay for it. So if we're just throwing out a laundry list of wishes, I mean, we have to be, I think, a lot more clear on who's doing it, who's funding it, and how we expect this to go, because this to me is too general for any legislator to take this and figure out what to do with it at this point. So maybe this is just our cursory laundry list, but to me, before I would feel comfortable even submitting some of these to the commission, I think we have to have real serious conversation about defining an innovation hub, what kind of competition, who's going to run it, where's the money coming from. I mean, we're post-COVID, and I think, well, not even post-COVID, we're still in the middle of the crisis, and everybody's budgets are absolutely being decimated in the government. So if we don't find money, there is no way for them to do this. And I don't see things passing next year associated with any cost at all with the way the budget's going to be. So I just want to be realistic.
Yeah, so as far as who it's directed toward, these are the GoBiz recommendations, and I believe, and maybe Committee Member Medrano can weigh in here. And I see Ann Schneider has her hand raised, but I'd like to call on Noel because I think he may have some information here, because I believe this is something that GoBiz does now.
Yeah, we're hoping that, thank you, John. We're hoping that GoBiz, with their relationships throughout the business community, could help us or help the state create these. It's at a minimum cost when it's business to business and working with industry. So it's not a huge expense on that agency. So I mean, these are just preliminary. Like Commissioner Sanborn alludes to, we have to definitely consult with them and see what we're talking about when it comes to costs. But at this point, they're just preliminary. So these are the hubs or innovation hubs are mainly to get involved not only with the again industry, but also maybe academia and anybody that's related to technology here in California. We're in the state that brought us Tesla and social media. So I think there's a lot that we could tap into when it comes to technology to help us with recycling, manufacturing, and any other new technologies available.
Is there a definition of hubs somewhere?
we could certainly find it and bring it. There's different types of hubs. We could supply that information. I could supply that information at a later point.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Member Schneider.
Well, and thank you. I think Commissioner Medrano kind of went where I was going. I'm trying to think back when we tried to do this in the way back or the before time. It's identifying universities that have departments that specifically work in product design, material design, and, you know, in a perfect world, all of those students would be getting training in a circular economy so that when they're designing products, those are all criteria that they are including in that. And I think we were doing this back in the mid-90s, and I'm not sure it went anywhere. But for number 16, I'd like to see us build that out a little bit more with the links to colleges and universities. I'm trying to think if it goes to another layer, but I'll put my thinking cap on. I know we tried it in the past, but I think we need it back. And maybe one of the recommendations, just like right now, there are recommendations going through that all schools must have training in, for want of a better word, racism. This could be training in circular economy.
So, Kate, if you why don't you make a note on here to let's try to elaborate number 16 better. And again, I think the goal here is not to try to write legislation so much as build on existing programs. So, and it could be that the GoBiz role is to facilitate or encourage these, but perhaps we can move it out of the GoBiz box if we do a little more research. So let's take 16 and dig into it. I think number 15 is something that GoBiz does now. Just have a focus. Manuel?
So just to clarify, I hope it's understood that innovation hubs does not mean brick and mortar type organizations or facilities. It's more of just bringing folks together from the different types of and sectors of industry, including academia. So there are some actual brick and mortar innovation hubs in the tech industry, but we're talking about more of a virtual hub that will bring folks together.
I see Heidi in the chat, and Ann, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was only going to say, again, this is old, but the Institute of Packaging Professionals did just such a hub back in the late 90s, and we together, it was a cross specialty area, and came up with some really innovative work that was immediately implemented. So if we can find those models and try to bring them forward, it can be done virtually.
Okay, Committee Member Sanborn.
Oh, thanks, and I appreciate Manuel explaining that. It wasn't clear to me that it was virtual or could be, so that's good. That's what I mean about defining what we mean by an innovation hub and making sure that's clear so that the legislators don't have to guess if this is in the recommendation. But one of the things I thought about was, as you know, I'm on the SMED board, and we are partnering with the University of Sac State and also with the City of Sacramento and others on a mobility center to work on innovations in transportation to reduce emissions. And I wonder if this is the kind of thing where we could partner, because one of the things that comes from that are batteries, which is also an issue that we have. And I wonder if there's other types of innovation hubs. There's also a green tech group that gets together here just in Sacramento, but I believe they're a national group, and they have they have meetings where people and innovators and designers get together and talk about the next green innovation they're going to come up with. And I just wonder if there's ways to piggyback on existing things and not create another thing just for waste management, because it seems like there's a lot of stuff going on out there right now that it would be probably a lot easier, a lot faster, and a lot cheaper to try and plug into existing innovation type hubs that might have started as an energy or transportation, but it could absolutely work with us on things like, you know, windmill blade waste and solar panel waste and battery waste and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to put that out there as another possibility when we start thinking about this more deeply of what we can do. Thanks.
Mr. Potashner.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back because I'm unclear. Can you go back to number 7 and explain the thinking behind that, authorizing CalRecycle to initiate a permit process?
Well, I think it's a bit of a grab bag as to who. Right now, given that we can't find an example of a project that's gone through this consolidated permitting process, it's been on the books. I misspoke. It's been on the books since 1993. So that's 27 years. It seems like there needs to be an entree there. So if CalRecycle can approach Cal EPA to do it, if GoBiz can approach them, if the developer can approach Cal EPA, those are all possible entrees. So I think this is in the context of how do we get the door open, but also.
So it's not actually initiating the process. It's you're trying to create a more open pathway towards consolidated permit. Okay.
It should say consolidated permit process. You're right. I see where you're going. Yeah. If you want to make that change, it's in the term permit agency is from the Consolidated Permit Act. So.
Okay. And then just back on the permitting process, the only other suggestion I'd make is, a little bit more transparency here, which is maybe there should be some sort of annual report from CalRecycle on the status of all permit applications.
You lost your sound.
Oh, can you hear me okay now? Is that better? Hello?
We can hear.
Yeah, okay. What I was saying was what could be low-hanging fruit is some sort of annual report back out on projects that are in the permitting pipeline, timelines behind it, how long it's taking, just so that we don't have that data right now. And I know everybody knows it takes a long time to get these facilities permitted, but I think having that data and having it placed for public consumption may put more pressure on some reforms. So it'd just be something I'd throw out there. Honestly, I can't tell if you guys heard that or not. But
I totally support that.
Now we can hear you. We can hear you now. Did everybody hear him? Because I could not.
I could.
Okay. I don't know what happened to me.
I totally agree. I mean, to me, that's a great idea, Eric, because that gives us the ability to see transparently how long permits are taking. And to me, that's the root of everything. What is taking long? Why is it taking a long time? How do we get those barriers out of the way? That to me is foundational to the rest of it. So I completely agree with that comment.
So Kate, could you, since I could not hear it for some reason, I'm on the phone. I don't know if that's affected it, but could you summarize his comment in writing here?
I'm going to avoid summarizing, but if someone wants to dictate a placeholder.
I can say basically what he's saying is, John, is that we need it would be good as a foundation to start with tracking the permits that are going through the process and how much time they're taking and where they're hitting barriers, because that would make it, apparently nobody's tracking that right now. There's no one place to get that. And I didn't know that. But then again, I've never seen anything like that. But that would be really helpful to know who's trying to get a permit, what for, and where are they hitting barriers, and how could we then give advice that might help us, to move through those in the future faster.
There might be an entree through the CEQA process because although it's, that may be later in the process than you want, but responsible agencies that have permit requirements are notified under CEQA, so there should be a database of that. And, anyway, Ann Schneider had her hand up.
I think we've talked about it at this level before, but when it gets down to the local government level, I think we've talked about it, especially with organics. There wouldn't be people that have the knowledge around organics to be able to know how to process it. But I like what, I like this direction, but I wonder at the local level, what kind of additional assistance CalRecycle or GoBiz could give to small cities who don't have the staffing for it. I think sometimes, and I see that with developments here, when you're a small city with a small staff, you can only get so much work done in a day. But one of the tools that has helped, even with grant writing, is at the county level, they have a program that can assist local governments with grant writing. So at the county level, could there be assistance with local governments processing this, or at the state level processing this? Because I think a lot of it's getting gummed up at the local level.
I think we talked about in the past.
I thought we did.
Some sort of, we did, because I remember we were talking about the CalRecycle LEA program, how they provide the technical assistance and oversight for enforcement of permits, and that there could be a need for something on the planning side, very similar.
Yeah.
Or something in the state agency, especially in organics, where frankly, when we've done it, a lot of local planning departments just don't know how to even start an organics planning process.
So I don't know if it fits under number 7 here, but I think that would help. It'll help by getting this into the general plan, but general plans take years to approve. And if we want to fast track this, it's got to go faster. Waving
So
my
in
magic
the
wand.
In the consolidated permit process, there is one of the state agencies acts as the quote permit agency. So that reference to permit agency from the consolidated permitting track would let CalRecycle act as that agency. And again, the idea would be to combine local government involvement with the state agency involvement that's permitted under the legislation, so that we try to get that exchange of knowledge. And but the next step, after we leave this narrative, we go back to our bulleted recommendations, and those are CalRecycle recommendations. So I think keep in mind what you've been discussing here, and we bring those back into the fold on the CalRecycle recommendation. Okay, so shall we move on to the recommendations that we have yet to discuss, which is the other list. Oh, go to the last part here, and community member Toyota has her hand up. There is an introductory paragraph that we put in there. Sarah?
Not really sure where to put this. It kind of belongs to the whole talk that we've been having right now, but markets are, they're an indicator of the entire system. And I feel like in market development, that's where we can pull all of this together. And I think that CalRecycle, like in 16, that they need to create these hubs. I think that I would like to see CalRecycle meet, like at an partner with the NGOs and meet with innovators and people who already have markets in the recycling system, and get information from there, and then find a way to disseminate it back all the way to the recycling facilities, the processors, and everyone else. I mean, at the end of the day, if nobody's getting quality recyclable material, you're never going to be able to sustain these markets. And also, when new markets come on, like, for instance, there's a couple comments about, again, carpets, but they're not getting the feedstock that they need. How is CalRecycle going to bring that back to basically the beginning of the recycling system? So I think that they not only need an annual report of here's what's the permitting, but they need an annual report of this is where the markets are, this is where the markets are opening up, this is how we can get the information to the people who put recyclables into their containers, all the way to now I have a feedstock for this new market.
Yeah, and I think go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I wrote, this is kind of what I had in mind, like CalRecycle must develop, CalRecycle should partner with NGOs to convene market development forum or workshops annually meet with stakeholders and investors. CalRecycle staff will be responsible to produce a report on market status for current markets, market development issues, opportunities, and potential investments. They should know that stuff, and then they should develop an internal system to disseminate that market information to producers, collectors, processors, material collection, and everywhere else that they need to get the high quality feedstocks to support the market. They need to bring that full circle. And I think that they can do it fairly easily by meeting meeting annually with these investors, even at places like CRRA conferences that are already going on, but taking that information and disseminating it and putting it into a report and then finding a way to get it back to the beginning where it needs to be. So those were my specific words. I don't know that they necessarily fit anywhere, or if they just are overall recommendations, at the end of the day.
So as we look at the next set of recommendations, the bulleted recommendations, why don't you bring those in and we'll add them for discussion. Heidi, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. And I totally hear you, Commissioner Toyota, because we need help with markets. That's very clear. The question is, I think, how do we do that most effectively? And having worked at CalRecycle and been in the chair's office and seeing how things go, I guess my concern again is, are we going to grow government to try and fix these problems, or are we going to try and get government out of the way and supportive and provide incentives for things? Because when the money is flowing in the right direction, things start happening that way automatically without being pushed. And so I'm trying to think of, I think you're absolutely correct, that market development is an indicator of the entire recycling system. I would add the health of the entire recycling system, if that's okay with you. Because if we don't have that market pull, there is no money to incentivize anybody to pull that stuff out and keep it clean. But
Right.
Having the government play the role of the market development group, to me, is very kind of optimistic, to be honest. And I'm wondering if we encourage or give more authority to CalRecycle to maybe, the main thing they can do is get the data and keep it transparent on what's going on and where we're having problems, and then look for solutions with those industries. How can we incentivize you to site in California? How can we get stuff cleaner? Do we need to ban the new product that just showed up that is a disruptor? Or giving them some authority to report back to the legislature on these things quickly, so we can have a much faster response when things hit the market that are causing problems. But I guess I just don't want to generally say,
I understand what you're saying, and you're right. So I think it's more of an information gathering. I think that report that's basically that we have down for permitting process, maybe we can expand that to cover more things so that the problems, just like Commissioner Potashner said, are transparent to everyone, and there's more push in more places than just permitting.
Oh, yeah. So let's look at the recommendations. But Kate, I think where you have the cursor, why don't you put in health of Commissioner Sanborn? Yeah, there you go. And then let's go to the recommendations. I'm sorry, Ann. Sorry, you had your hand up.
Just before you go there, I'm looking at the last sentence of number 17, and it's this where we were.
The paragraph.
The new paragraph.
Yeah.
Where it says the stakeholders of all stages of recycling, including collection, processing, and product design. I prefer seeing product design first, because bad products mean we can't collect and process. So just kind of putting it back into a hierarchy. And I'm not really good at wordsmithing on the fly, but it goes back to what Chair Sanborn said. If there are products that are bad, the discussion of banning. And maybe once a year, the top 10 disruptors are identified and pressure is put back upstream to say, you got to change this, period. And the legislators come up with a law to say that.
Yeah, and I think on the commission charge, you know, we may be talking about that. I'm not sure how that fits on market development unless, you know, you've got products that are contaminating things to the point that you can't.
I understand, but maybe the message then, Commissioner Davis, is it is not up to recycling infrastructure to come up with a market for everything that is produced.
Yeah.
It's a joint responsibility, and we're going to have to be really firm with that. We don't have to keep jumping for every new product.
Okay, why don't you put a placeholder on that paragraph for that? Market development does not mean finding a market for every product.
Thank you.
And I like the focus on products. So often we end up talking about materials, but it's really the products. People are buying products. They're not buying materials.
And then to be overly anal, it's product and packaging.
Okay.
Thanks, staff.
All right. Well, we're going to keep looking at this. So now let's go to the recommendations around CalRecycle, because I think that paragraph was kind of intended to be an initial cut as a lead-in. And just a reminder, why don't you hold it where it is, Kate? What we are specifically being asked to do for the commission is address the elements of the Public Resources Code, beginning with increasing market demand for materials. And so what we've been talking about today along permit streamlining, permit assistance, the GoBiz programs are demand side. You know, we kind of had this idea under AB 939, we push material out there, it'll find a home. I think we've learned that, you know, the home is based on the demand. And so how do we increase demand for the material and pull them through the system rather than push them through from the supply side? So, but just to keep in mind, we have this focus, number one, on increasing market demand. And so the first set of recommendations from the subcommittee and from our discussion focus on the demand side. So let's scroll down to, so we've gone through all these initial items. There's the GoBiz items. Okay, so actually the next one, and I misspoke, and maybe we can do this one fairly quickly. These are the emission reduction factors that Air Resources Board developed, and they're used on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, so the ARB, GGRF. Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is the money when it's available from the cap and trade auction revenues to support organics and recycling facilities. And so the first suggestion there is to update the recycling emission reduction factors to reflect California grid emissions rather than standard national emissions. So as California is at about 35% sustainable, the recycling emission reduction factors that the Air Resources Board adopted use WARM, the US EPA's waste reduction model, and those factors include national grid factors. So like any model, you have to standardize or use some number, but using the national grid really discounts the value of recycling emission reduction factors for work that's done in California. So that rolls back into a CEQA analysis, for example. If we're citing a facility in California, it has a substantially greater reduction factor than the national model. So the first recommendation would be to update that and use the California grid emission, and hopefully in a way that could be continually updated as California's grid becomes increasingly cleaner. The next one is to take the Air Resources Board compost emission reduction factors. First of all, they're still in draft form. ARB never adopted them for some reason that's never been quite clear to me. They adopted one set, but they didn't adopt the updated. emission reduction factors. And the factors that are out there use methane as a short life, as a CO2 equivalent. So it converts methane to carbon dioxide, which means methane is about 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. As when it's considered as carbon dioxide, methane, as we know from SB 1383, is a short life climate pollutant, and it's actually 84, 85 times more potent than carbon dioxide as methane. So the second suggestion is to treat methane as a short life climate pollutant and not as a CO2 equivalent, and issue emission reduction factors around that. I actually did that on for a client, and called ARB and asked, was this the right way to do it? It was very simple. It didn't take a lot of time to do it, but it had a big difference, about 3 times greater impact.
John, on this one, and we heard this from in the Organics Committee, ARB, in consultation with CalRecycle, they are going through a statewide compost emissions factor study right now.
Great. Okay. So this was the recommendation to use the short life factor?
I think they're trying to, and this is more on the permitting side too, they're trying to just figure out sort of a emissions factor that can be used for compost permitting going forward. And I just imagine it would inform this issue too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can still keep this alive and then see how. I think that's part of the how we mesh with the recommendations coming from the other committees. So yet to be determined. Heidi, you had your hand. No. Okay. Sorry. Ann?
I did, John.
Okay.
I'm putting my Sierra Club hat on now and quoting from Peter Anderson when we were working on landfill gas issues. We used a factor of 105 times. Methane is 105 times worse. This was based when President Bush was in the office, and the National EPA had that information, but it had been washed out of the reports. So I'd have to go back to Peter Anderson and double check that. But I wonder if the state is doing an analysis of emissions from composting operations, isn't part of the problem then that composting operations are held to standards that are much higher than landfills? And therefore it pushes keeping organics in landfills so that you can allegedly recover gas from them versus a composting system or an anaerobic digestion system where you can actually truly capture everything. There was also a number of 80% fugitive emissions from landfill gas collection systems. So I'd have to go back and check. When you said 80 to 85 number, my Sierra Club world, we're at 105.
Well, the number I used is from the international protocols, the IPCC.
And this was tied in with some NASA study that was done. I haven't worked on this in about 10 years, so I'd have to go back and check it. So those numbers are still, I think, in flex.
Heidi?
Yeah, we're not air quality experts on methane. I don't think this is a detail we should be diving into. We should just leave it up to the source. We just heard at SMUD that there's a new number, and the number I heard was 35 times worse. So I don't think we should just refer to some authority on this issue and I think move on.
Well, Kate, if you could add, at least from my perspective, that we would suggest using IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change,
Okay.
which is generally recognized. Their number is constantly changing, which is part of the problem, because they're constantly considering feedback loops. Eric, did you have a response to Ann's comment about better to put it in landfill?
Sorry, I got distracted. What was the comment? Sorry.
No,
I think it was. Go ahead.
It's when the Sierra Club was taking a policy position on landfill gas to energy versus other forms of handling organics. And on top of that, knowing that the air resources boards were being really hard on composting operations, but pretty easy on landfills. So we'll see how this evolves, John, and I have to go back into that world and do some homework.
Yeah.
But
So
we worked
two things.
in that NGO capacity. We worked that there's by far more fugitive emissions of methane and radicals coming from landfill gas collection systems than have been identified.
Oh yeah, there was a study I think about a year ago or so that I think even the best landfill gas collection systems are only capturing 65 to 70% of all releases. So no argument here.
But I don't want, I mean, is it still true that the air boards are, how do I say this given that we're being taped? They're not necessarily our friends on this, that they could be driving materials to landfills instead of composting operations.
What I would say is there isn't a holistic approach right now when they're looking at every facility on its own as if it's a new emission, and they're not looking at a compost facility in terms of the reductions it may be providing other areas because it's not going to landfill. So that approach, I think, needs some evolution for sure, so that they're capturing those benefits as well as what's going on specifically at the compost facility.
Great. So I'm not that rusty.
There's also an issue about landfills being essential public services that get a different treatment at air quality management districts.
Yes.
And I'm guessing the organics committee may be addressing that, so we didn't enter into that fray here. That makes a big difference. The next two bullets one has to do with carbon farming. So this is something we heard about at one of the early commission meetings. It's the idea of actually utilizing the compost, particularly on grassland projects and where you're not tilling, it's not a crop raising so much as revegetation of open areas and using compost in those. So the suggestion would be to consider adopting carbon emission factors or carbon farming emission factors so that those could be at least approached on a standardized basis. There is some interest in offsetting emissions, but you need to have some kind of a verifiable protocol to be able to do that. So, and the Marin Carbon Project gives us data around carbon farming. So again, it's try to kick some discussion around that. And you have your hand up.
Just wondering, with the carbon farming factors, are they also allowing or locking in more moisture into the soil? We're getting the early studies from our lightning strike fires, and slightly off topic, but our redwood forest burnt here because we went 8 days without fog, and that dried out the forest enough so that when the lightning strikes hit, they took off the way they did. So now how we can keep more moisture into the system as well as carbon is on my new emergency services hat.
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit of research on compost utilization and moisture retention, in improving the soil porosity. And
Perfect.
I was reading an article on fire damaged soils out of my own self-interest yesterday, and there have been research on using compost to slow down the erosion, using mulch to slow down the erosion. So it's there's quite a bit of research out there on that.
Well, in the land of fire, moisture has become one of the new metrics that are really jumping up on things. So if we can also sell this as moisture, I think that's another plus.
Okay. Kay, why don't you put a placeholder in? Well, it's really not a ARP issue, I don't think. But you go ahead and put a placeholder in for utilization in fire areas. It'd probably fall better on probably fall better in Eric's committee. But let's make sure we don't lose track of that. And then the last bullet here is to consider using zero interest loans in lieu of grants for the GGRF money, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund money. The grants have stimulated a lot of interest. They generally don't cover the full cost of the project. If you're loaning money, the money comes back and becomes a revolving fund. So I have to think that zero interest loans may be attractive. We heard from the CalRecycle people last month about the RMDZ program. They also administer the GTRF loans, and they felt that having a fixed rate 4% loan was attractive for businesses. So just another thought that maybe falls here or falls more appropriately under countercycle. Heidi.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't think 4% loans right now for a business that take time and going through government are the way to incentivize anything. A zero interest loan, I think, would, as long as the process moves quickly to get them the money. The biggest problem I think we've seen is that government loan processes tend to not move very quickly and find a whole lot of reasons why things get delayed. So, and a lot of requirements. So I think if we streamline the process and it's truly zero interest and quick, it would be useful. So that's a great suggestion, as long as those other parameters. So maybe we zero waste loans and you know, that are timely, you know, in their execution or something.
So hold that thought, because if you look at the next bullet that we're going to be discussing, it's right there. Sarah Toyota had her hand.
Yeah, it was also another, I think a public comment that I agree with is possibly having seed money up front for smaller businesses as well. I'd like to add that somewhere in the loan arena.
Yeah, let's get that in the countercycle basket here. Move off. So let's move off the ARB GTRF discussion for now. So the first bullet here, back to Committee Member Sanborn's comment: accelerate loan approvals to a maximum 30-day process upon receipt of a complete loan application. So it is a shared responsibility. If you don't have a final loan application, obviously you can't trigger. But I think, if you were to go to the bank and they ask how long it would take to get your loan approved once you give them the application, I think 30 days is a reasonable time. So I think that seems appropriate. Could be 15 days, could be 45 days, but until we hear otherwise, we're suggesting 30. One of the things that I believe zone administrators have found is that right now, what happens with the RMDZ, businesses will call, they're interested in an RMDZ loan, and there's an intake process that takes place that requires an application before the business is referred to the loan staff. And so you've got rather than talking to a loan officer to determine eligibility and understand the loan, you have to fill out an application to determine whether you're eligible. And I think that's a process that may be part of the delay. You've got an application to get in line to fill out an application. So, and I see, Kate, you have a public comment?
I do. Hi, everyone. And sorry, it's difficult. Since I have a Word open, the 150-word doc, so I'm going to go through this whole one. This was in regards to the last document we looked at. It was item 16 in priorities and recommendations. This is from the Fix-It Clinic, apologies, and they sent this at 10:09. Regarding item 16 in the efforts to create academic innovation initiatives with respect to repair, reuse, and recycling and innovation cores. Fix-It Clinic is holding repair events through colleges, universities, and the national research labs now to inform up and coming engineers and designers to see how design for manufacturing, DFM, is currently practiced and to incorporate durability, maintainability, and serviceability going forward for the coming circular economy, to teach how to design and offer products that provide high utility for the longest period possible, to be easy to service, maintain, and repair, and to be trivial to recycle if they ever have to be. Even during the pandemic, we've held multiple events virtually through UC Berkeley and Lawrence Livermore National Lab in California, and outside California through Harvard University, CU Boulder, and Lund University in Sweden. And we've just launched a Global Fixers Discord server to facilitate asynchronous, I can't say that word, sorry, around the clock, around the world repair. And this is from Peter Mew at Fix-It Clinic, fixitclinic.org. That comment has been published, and that is all.
I have a feeling if we could somehow gather the information about all these initiatives that are ongoing, we'd find that there's quite a bit of going on. I think maybe it's how we share that information becomes our issue. And Committee Member Sanborn is in the chat.
Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned this when we were talking about recycling markets and the feedstock, is I think we need to be, not just deal with the contamination, but also the toxics and making sure we're getting the toxics out of the system, which also, so is there a way to go back there and add the word, or add, new markets require high quality feedstock, which has proper education, low contamination, eliminates toxics, maybe. The toxics has been a big problem. I mean, we've got
Is that a
PFAS and...
revision to, is that a revision to one of the sentences or a new sentence here?
Yeah, it's just adding the toxics to the sentence. So at the top where it says that we need high quality feedstock, which is obtained through proper education, low contamination, I would say eliminated toxics, because we have to eliminate the toxics in order to have a system that's, because basically toxics are a disruptor. Does that make sense? Or do you have any other suggestions? Okay.
Yeah, we could just put contain no toxins.
Sorry. Look,
Sorry, I didn't catch that earlier.
is this fine? Apologies. Feedback is obtained. Eliminate toxins.
Proper education, low contamination, eliminated toxics and minimum. I'm not sure if that reads great. Like I think I want to kind of go over this whole thing.
We'll work on
We can
Yeah, we'll work on that.
wordsmith later. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So back on the cow recycle, we're really, I think the first set on cow recycle has to do with the RMDZ. The third bullet is to offer an online loan application to be processed by loan staff. So again, trying to streamline the process and make things easier. You know, a lot of it really has to do with eligibility. I think both Manuel and I get calls from people who are interested, want to learn about the RMDZ program and the loans, and a lot of times that's, you know, once they learn about the loan, they may not be eligible, the terms may not be what they're looking for, may not be enough money, maybe more than they're looking for at the minimum threshold. So that initial intake, it becomes really important. The third bullet is something that was discussed, I think, under the Integrated Waste Management Board, and Heidi may recall a discussion like this, but taking it, there were sales of the loan portfolio, kind of like a secondary market sale that takes place, and money is generated to go out on as more loans. There's always a discount involved with that, so you lose some of the principal value of the money by doing that, but you keep money in flow. Selling loans secured by loan repayment is a little different process. The discounting is not as great, I believe, but it never really reached the culmination. So this is an idea. If we find that we think there's not enough money in the RMDZ program, this would be an idea to refresh the amount of money that's in there, and keep generating additional loans rather than waiting for the loan repayments. So again, it's a concept that was put forward, and then for whatever reason never went forward. And you're in the chat.
A comment, because my county isn't an RMDZ, but I strongly believe that every county, I'm not sure about the desert counties, should have a commercial composting operation. And but if they needed a loan, and let me go backwards, if a composting operation in every county was considered critical infrastructure, the same way you mentioned that landfills are critical infrastructure, then shouldn't they be on the list of who could get startup funds, loans on that? I understand the RMDZ program, but I also want to make sure that we can get the composting operation set up that we need.
Yeah, the compost money that's going on now in loans and grants, or the grant money is from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and that's statewide. And there's also a Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund loan program that's statewide. So there is money available.
Okay.
It's not limited to RMDZ.
When you said greenhouse gas, you mean cap and trade funds?
Well, it's auction revenues that are allocated to specific programs. And
Okay.
so yeah, it comes from the cap and trade auction revenues.
And maybe that's a bullet point farther on, and maybe I'm the only one that wants a commercial compost facility in every county, but we should have something specifically for organics then that's outside an RMDZ.
Yeah, there is now.
Okay.
And I'm as you're talking, I'm trying to load the CalRecycle has a map of RMDZs, so that shows the location. And a lot of times it's a matter of just annexing to an existing zone in order to facilitate a program accessing the resources. So, Manuel Zone include added Imperial County a few years ago. So.
Or you just absorb the whole county, because that gives you that rural land or that agricultural land that has a ready-made market for the finished compost. So I can't. I'll look at the map again, John.
Yeah, I finally got it loaded. No, San Mateo County is not a part of,
Right.
of the zone.
And where the most likely location for a commercial operation would be coastside, which is very rural. It would not be here on this side where land values are in the land of Google and Facebook. Wouldn't work.
Okay. Yeah, and I can point you into the GGRF loan program. There is money.
Well, I just would make sure that it's in our documentation too.
Yeah, I think it's in what I'd have to look more closely at what CalRecycle sent as follow-up. It's certainly on their website. The maximum loan amount issue is, it's $2 million. It's been $2 million for a long time. So the value of money changes, but the maximum loan amount is there. There's workarounds because you can have a second loan and all that, but I think it's worth discussing whether maybe going to $2.5 million for the max would be adequate. I've heard discussions, and we've had discussions with the zone administrators over time about the minimum amount, and I think we've heard comments about how to assist small businesses, and it's been a while since I think the zone administrators have discussed mini grants or smaller loans, but that could be something to look at as well. What the minimum threshold is. Heidi?
Thanks, John. On the limit of the loan, I guess what was the thinking on $2.5 million, and should we even put a limit on it? I mean, I think it's up to the state on how much money they have and what they think is the most valuable. Because I mean, there are carpet facilities, they're $20 million, or there's other facilities.
Right now, it's $2 million for a loan limit.
No, I know, but all I'm saying is that some of these facilities are super capital intensive, and I'm not sure going up $500,000 makes that big of a difference. And I'm wondering if we should just say that it needs to be dramatically increased, and we should focus the money on the material types that we need markets for the most, and that maybe instead of doing a bunch of little loans for little materials at 2.5 million, that maybe we need a really big paper mill and we need to get that done. And that's a, $80 million facility and they're asking for $5 million. I don't know, but I guess I'm just worried about putting a number on it, and maybe we could put some parameters on that. The priority should be on the material types of highest need at that point in time that we need markets for, and that the loan amount should be increased dramatically in order to truly incentivize these facilities to come. But I'm not sure we should put a limit on it.
Yeah, right now it says increase it. So if you want to, Kate, if you want to put Heidi's comments in here for consideration, and then Manuel, I think, had his hand up. But,
Yeah, I think
increased loan amount focused on highest priority materials and financing needs, right?
I think to address Commissioner Sanborn's comment is that there obviously needs to be more money available for that grant, for that loan fund, because the $2 million, I'm sure, was the number was created so there could be a certain amount of loans developed throughout the year. But in reality is that you're right. There's facilities that could eat that up in a second. So we need to obviously add more funds to that loan fund in order to be able to create those larger loans for carpet or composting or whatever needs to happen.
Yeah, well, let's keep those thoughts as we work through here. And, the next item really, I think, is kind of one of those qualitative statements of trying to cooperatively restructure the program. I learned things on from the presentation from CalRecycle at our last meeting that were new to me, and I've been a zone administrator for 25 years and try to keep up with stuff. So I think we have had at times we have quarterly or semi-annual training, I guess now, right, Manuel? The Zone Works, where the zone administrators and CalRecycle staff meet, and there's exchange of ideas, but I think a lot of zone administrators feel that we could have a better system of communication around restructuring the program, and including borrowers, businesses that have participated in that. So, this is I think a suggestion to try to come up with what do we need to make this program work better from a market development standpoint, but hearing from everybody and not doing a top-down approach. And the next bullet, I think, is a big change to have a market development section in CalRecycle. Staff with business development, fiscal, and economic analysis expertise. Right now, the RMDZ program is kind of focused on the local assistance branch. The policy branch does market research, which I think committee member Toyota was focused on with her earlier comments. And so you got this bifurcation where I think we recognize how important market development is to keep a healthy recycling system. And the suggestion would be to try to merge those functions, bring it back into a focus where the information is gathered, utilized, and shared in a more centralized fashion. So, that's a big recommendation for CalRecycle, but they have staff doing it. They're just operating in different bailiwicks right now, and then it's hard for us. I try to dial in when I can for market development updates on CalRecycle agendas or workshops, but we don't always get the information that might be useful to us. And we've heard already today, we've heard some ideas about getting more of that information, like bringing, what permits are out there, working on organic organic side. So anyway, that's a recommendation to try to focus CalRecycle on market development more clearly. And the next bullet is, I think, a way to do that. What are the gaps on in-state recycling, organics, reuse and repair infrastructure? And what are strategies to fill those gaps? So, paper, we're shipping cardboard still, exporting it. How do we close that gap? How do we do things here in California? What's the status of plastics recycling in California? And you've got different infrastructure in Southern California than Northern California. We're still sending some materials out of state. The in-state markets for materials ebb and flow. Where are we on the goal of meeting our needs in California in-state, let alone the reuse and repair infrastructure, which people like Peter Mui and Fix-A-Clinic, they're knowledgeable about it, but I don't have a clue. I try to find out where I can get my iPod battery replaced, and it becomes a Google map exercise and phoning around to see who's actually there and doing things. So, the next two are kind of where there was a mention earlier about trying to focus on highest priorities. So we put a priority on paper pulping. I think Commissioner Potashner and I identified that early on. And we're working with the BIN Summit coming up on October 28th to have some presentations on paper pulping from two advocates of that process who are building brand new facilities, one in Virginia and one in Utah. So we might, after that October 28th meeting, might have some follow-up for this committee if we want to really dig into the issues there. But the structure of the summit is what would it take to bring these facilities into California? Hearing from people who are actually developing the facilities in Utah and Virginia. Priority to expand existing in-state businesses to handle more volume and materials. It's one of the principles of economic development that you start with the businesses you already have. It's always attractive to think you're going to go find new businesses and bring them into a community, but the businesses who are there are grounded in the community, and a lot of times we can grow them. People are making plastic products in California. Are they reusing recycled plastic as their feedstock? And how do we get more of that use and create the demand for the feedstock? We heard from AF&PA that there are, I think, over 400 different paper businesses, paper recycling related businesses that they've identified in California. Who are they, and how do we work with them? What's the inventory of those businesses, and what do they need to handle more volume? And it's just a basic economic development principle. Creating a RMDZ inventory of small recycling businesses. I'm not sure what small is and how we define it, but it was something that we heard from this group. That's a priority. A small business in federal statute is not, I think, what most of us think of as a small business. So, but I'm not, and their needs in the RMDG program can be very different. So, Attorney Member Snyder, is he looking to speak?
John, you may be lumping in reuse and repair operations under recycling operations, but if not, can we bold that out?
Yeah, and I do, yeah, I learned in, I think it was in 1383, recycling means composting, reuse, and repair. So it is kind of a shorthand, but I think you're right. It should be small recycling, reuse, and repair businesses. And then for the next one, they would just say small businesses, as we know who we're talking about. small business, leave small in there. And frankly, I think there are small organics businesses, people who apply compost, for example. Maybe some of the chip and grind are small businesses. I don't know. Yeah, I think a lot of times we tend to focus on moderate to larger opportunities and ignore the small ones.
Well, and with food reuse, who knows what may grow there? I mean, they're the food banks, but then there could be a bunch of additional entities who were never in the food reuse business, but now are.
Yeah, and there are ways to use classification codes, industrial classification codes to identify businesses, and I've actually looked at those databases, and I think it's it's something that can be done pretty expeditiously just to get a handle on how many potential businesses are out there. But if you're in the appliance or electronic repair business and you have an industrial classification code, you're a repair business, and it would be good to know how many thousands of those, or hundreds, or dozens still exist in California. The database of existing manufacturers who can use recycled materials, again, it's, if you look at standard industrial classification codes around plastics, product manufacturers, those are all potential for using material that is recovered and available for them. So how do we reach out to them? But first of all, who are they and where are they? And for people like Manuel and I, the zone administrators, if we know we have businesses out there that we just haven't turned up, it would be a very useful database. This next one, I think, again, we heard at the last meeting about the coordination that the CalRecycle does with GoBiz. So, they may bring in a business, find either their feedstock's not eligible, they need more money than the RMGZ program provides, and so those businesses get referred to GoBiz for their assistance, or maybe to access tax credit. I'm not sure the loop is closed. I'm not sure the zone administrators know about that, and a lot of times those are businesses that we could be working with on other issues like helping get feedstock or permit compliance issues. So, I think closing that loop, I think Kara Morgan mentioned in the presentation at our last meeting that the CalRecycle is assisting 30 to 40 businesses a month with their inquiries on for business assistance. That's 350 to almost 500 businesses a year that are coming through, and who are they? What's happening with them? It would be good to have that information available to at least the zone administrators, but I think it's the basis for expanding our efforts. The next one, I think we talked about a bit earlier on sharing market information, but this is a bit more explicit. And I know a couple of the Northeast Recycling Coalition, they have a regular reporting on pricing, export, import data. It'd be good to know what contamination limits markets are looking for right now, and what the trends and opportunities are. So it's like a monthly market update for us. Where are materials going? What are the pricing trends? What are the contamination issues around specific materials? Just sharing that generally in the community. There's a lot of, we all know it's out there, but unless you're really closely involved in marketing material, you may not be aware of these things. And even though these would be generalized data, price indexes or more generalized than a specific sale data, but it's still useful information from a trend analysis and help recyclers understand what's going on in the marketplace rather than get blindsided. The next one is I guess a bullet share information with partners that is kind of a subset of the earlier one, to share the market information. And I think maybe this one gets absorbed across a variety of different tasks. But again, it's to become an information source in a cooperative fashion. And let's all work together, sharing information. The next one's a big one. It's been talked about, putting a per ton fee on landfills. You probably should say landfills and incinerators, but the disposal activities that are not where material is destined, that's not part of the recycling system. There's a $1.35 charge right now. If that went up by $1, that's still less than the inflation since the $1.35 was established. But if it went up by $1, it would generate over $40 million annually. It needs to be a standalone support for recycling market development to help build the infrastructure here. Large projects can go into a, there's industrial development bonds from the IBank. There are other means to access lower cost money for large projects, but it doesn't always apply on that small and medium scale, which is one of the reasons you've got that $2 million out there. And Kate, I see you have a comment.
Yes, there is one public comment from Tim Shestak at American Chemistry Council submitted 2 minutes ago. This was in regard to this agenda item. In any recommendation for CalRecycle to identify gaps or opportunities for in-state recycling, this look should include both mechanical recycling and advanced recycling technologies. I would encourage the committee to review a recent report from Closed Loop Partners on advancing circular systems for plastic. And Tim provides the URL, and this comment has been published in our portal.
Okay, thank you. So, so the per ton fee has been around. Obviously, there's some legislative issues around that, but I think what we're focused on, market development, building jobs, building business opportunities, putting value-added manufacturing in California rather than exporting the wealth. Hopefully, if an increase on landfill fees were tied to improving the business system, that may be helpful. I think there are other things that, as we think about what we're recommending here, there may be some other opportunities eventually, and Commissioner Potashner's familiar with one of those with the initiative and the amount of the resources that might become available there. So we ought to be thinking about how we tap into other potential sources of money. Let's talk about a green infrastructure bond initiative earlier in the year before COVID hit. So, but the fact that the landfill fees have been in place since the 90s with no change in the fee erodes the value of it, and I think at some point there's a logic in addressing it, particularly if we can dedicate some of that money to building businesses here. The recycling communication system in regard to what we call circular economy, there's a lot of talk around that. This is one of those issues similar to what we talked about earlier. It's a little bit vague, but I think it's a bullet point to try to keep recycling in the conversation. And I notice a lot of times, because I track greenhouse gas discussions quite frequently, and a lot of that ends up focused on energy and transportation rather than the consumption impacts. And so we don't want to lose track of our ability to be a part of the broader discussions. The next one is, I think, a bullet that came out of one of the subcommittee conversations about what do we need to make decisions rather than saying we did this. We have reusable coffee cups at City Hall. that becomes a check in the box, right? Rather than a focus on the broader issues around disposable single-use plastics and how we, how communities are addressing it. So I think again, it's a pretty broad concept, but it's an idea of trying to move away from too much in the last one, too much micromanagement and too much box checking, as opposed to actually focusing on where the impacts are locally on what we're doing. And then again, sharing the information and being in a cooperative feedback loop. So, these last three and some of the earlier ones, I think, are more an approach than anything specific, but I think it reflects concerns, at least from subcommittee discussions, concerns about how we're interacting as local government people. Cal Recycle and committee member Toyota, comment?
I agree. These last three are pretty broad, but they're important. But I almost think that they've been addressed kind of earlier with the more specific comments about getting market information, understanding trends, and getting that out to the stakeholders and so forth. So I don't know if I think at least the last three I might even consider just taking out. I personally feel like they've more or less been addressed more specifically earlier in this in earlier bullet.
Anybody want to leave these in?
Yeah, I just think it's less is more, and I think the clearer and shorter we are, the better. So I agree with Commissioner Toyota on that.
And Schneider?
I'm sorry, I'm a big fan of checking boxes off the list. Maybe that falls under what would go into a general plan. So the other two, that's fine, but check boxes are really easy to wrap your hands around.
Yeah, and again, this is in the context of Cal Recycle, and I think it's more, what kind of information they're sometimes asking for, but it's not on the general plan side at all. And Cal Recycle still has their annual report. It's still in there, but I think it's. I tend to agree with committee member Toyota. I think we've probably addressed these.
Okay.
And back at it again. Okay, so let's go ahead and remove those three and save ourselves some headache. Great. So I'd like to look at the SABRAC items if there's nothing else at this point on the Cal Recycle one. This came largely, a lot of this came from Cal Recycle, although the subcommittee included some items that I don't think we had on the Cal Recycle side. Sarah, you have a comment?
Yeah, on the last part under the RMDZ, would that be a good place to consider adding having the seed funding for the loans, upfront funding for basically for smaller businesses who need that to get started? We ran into that a lot with the integrated water management program, and it ended up helping quite a few projects get off the ground.
Yeah, let's put something in there, and we'll try to think about how. Part of the problem is just sometimes it's the cost of borrowing that affects loan size. I know there were issues on the reuse grant that went out right now because it has a minimum grant size of like $250,000. So, and it's not clear to me why. Yeah. Let's go ahead and put that in there.
Maybe we just write something to consider allowing seed money to qualifying, or basically however they want to define the parameters that they meet, to qualifying projects or borrowers.
So these are small,
And then
these are small. So
generally
let's
they
just
are.
provide,
Generally they're very small.
provide seed money for small businesses. We had something earlier up there.
And you can add if you want that meet, certain criteria that they, whatever loan criteria that they need to meet for them to be able to do that, they can define that. We don't necessarily need to do that.
Okay. Manuel Medrano, you have your...
Yeah, perhaps it's part of the CalRecycle RMDZ fifth bullet where we ask to increase the maximum amount. We could also ask for a development of a microloan program for business. I mean, just a suggestion if it could either go there or what Commissioner Toyota mentioned in the bottom there, either or. But something, and they could, well, I guess we could develop that a little further as to what that amount of a microloan would be.
Okay. Good. Okay, so back on the SABROC, the first one to use life cycle analysis, the state of Oregon has a similar process going on with the recycling committee. I can't forget what it's called now, but they just issued their initial set of recommendations. In Oregon, they're really focused on materials management that is driven by life cycle analyses. So I think this is an idea to begin to build a network or framework of knowledge around life cycle of products, so that we get verifiable data and not just, if we want to know if something is recyclable or not, or has recycled content, how do we verify that for individual products? But it also looks at more performance data than simply the recycled content.
So I'll restate my mantra that everything costs money. And if the state is going to compile this, they need the staff to do it. And if we're going to have life cycle studies for everything, they're extremely expensive and time consuming. I mean, I think all of us agree that we all want more data and we want to make sure we pick the right materials based on their true life cycle impacts. The question is, how much resources, who has the resources to ensure that we get those life cycle studies? Who's going to pay for them? Are they going to be accurate? Who's making sure they're transparent? Because if they're funded by the companies that are selling the products, I always question if there's no verification of that study. You can always manipulate formulas to get a certain outcome. And so when we did the paint life cycle study for the paint dialogue, we had eyes from the industry, from the government, from the NGOs, all on how we set up that entire life cycle study. And back 15 years ago, it was over $250,000. So just for one product type. So I think it's we have to be very careful. And I agree with the foundation about getting life cycle analysis and good data. But the question is, where does it come from? Is it good data? How long is it going to take and who's going to pay for it? So there's still a lot of details around this that would need to be hammered out, I think.
Yeah, and part of it, I think we're asking to begin to compile it, maybe not require it. I know that part of the difficulty I've had is just trying to access life cycle studies. There was a real famous one a while back about domestic coffee packaging, and it took a group of us quite a while to find the actual study. even though the results have been shared and promoted. But and some of the studies are published in journals that have restricted, subscriber access. So I think that, part of it would be just to, begin to compile this, and so it's in a central spot that we can look at those studies. I agree with what you're saying about the accuracy and validity of them, but right now there's nothing. It's just a random search for studies if you're interested on a product.
Exactly. So if we say compile, maybe we say compile high quality and comprehensive life cycle analyses, and that's something that is just in the mix of the discussion. But then again, I don't know, some products may not have a life cycle, and so what does that mean? Does that mean we not buy them through the state? I just don't want it to be so limiting.
Yeah, I don't think that compiling it means that it becomes a factor. I wouldn't even know what the factor is, and so I think it's having them available to the extent that they're available. It's a first step. It's a first step. It'd be great to have. It'd be great to have life cycle on everything, and I think it's in there. So committee member Schneider has a brief event that's calling her council member duties. So we were scheduled to take a break at 11:15, but if there's no objections, why don't we break now? And that is for how long? Right. Yeah. So let's break for 5 minutes.
That was what was scheduled. Yes, sure.
Okay. You know what? We're making pretty good progress. So why don't we take a 10-minute break, and let's try to be back at 11:12. Got it. So if you're on and without your camera, turn your cameras on so I know who's here. Yeah, I think the next two, I believe, on SABREC were from the subcommittee, and then, or maybe the next three. So along the lines of our earlier discussion about focusing on reusable, refillable, repairable, durable, and then single use. So I think this, I don't believe this one came from Calvert Cycle. This is a subcommittee recommendation. And I know the next one is requiring repair information for all purchases, including electronics. So that was not on the Calvert Cycle list. Again, I think it's important, particularly kind of advance the discussion around right to repair. If you have an item that can be repaired, you should be able to repair it. If you can't repair it, maybe that's a purchasing consideration. Along the line of the bullet up above it, to have reusable, refillable, and repairable options identified in the SABRAC database. And then an enforcement mechanism for non-compliant state agencies. That may be duplicative of one of the CalRecycle recommendations. And their recommendations actually start from the next bullet down. So you may want to come back and remove the enforcement mechanism. So what CalRecycle suggested in their presentation and their report on the state agency by recycle program was that to clarify that it covers all purchases of goods by state agencies and contractors, and I think it's the contractor part that's been missing. It includes service contracts where the contractor is purchasing reportable products, to revise the product categories and minimum content percentages and update every 3 years rather than freezing them for decades. Remove a requirement to purchase only when available at the same or lesser total cost of non-recyclable products. So if an agency wants to purchase, let them do it, but not make the cost an absolute factor. Codify the process for non-compliant agencies, and I think that may be the one that is duplicative of the bullet up above on creating an enforcement mechanism for non-compliant agencies. So we can try to find out if they're contradictory. And then annual mandatory online training for procurement and contracting officers. So again, those last half dozen or so are all recommended by CalRecycle, and the subcommittee felt they were worthy of including. Any further discussion on the SABRAC? Heidi?
Yes, thank you. I think this is one that's very close to be, just being done and given to the commission to approve tomorrow, because we've already gone over it. We've had CalRecycle give us the presentation. Everything in this list that is, that CalRecycle gave us is in the list. The thing that I'm questioning is what we added and why to what CalRecycle did, and I don't want, to do duplication. I don't think that's helpful for anybody. So could we go over again, why did we add all these things that CalRecycle didn't think were recommended?
Well, we talked about the life cycle, creating a, compiling life cycle analysis products.
I can tell you, I think that adds a layer of complication that we have no idea how this is going to play out. And I really worry maybe that it's going to slow things down tremendously. And I really wonder if we should just say that, if it doesn't slow down the process and if it's, I don't want it to be a mandate for the whole program to be updated. Let's put it that way. So if it's a suggestion, I'd be fine with it.
Well, these are all recommendations. What if we say compile life cycle analyses for products purchased by the state and just leave it at life cycle analyses when available for products purchased by the state? Okay.
I think that would be great. So we could just add when available, because if it's not available, I don't want to stop the progress.
No, we can clarify it's not a prerequisite.
Well, number 2, offer durable. Offering, I mean, the state isn't offering, the state is procuring. So would we say that we want to incentivize through the state agency by recycled paint program, durable, reusable products, if possible?
Incentivize or include,
we're not, the state wouldn't be offering, incentivizing through the procurement process the purchase of durable, reusable, refillable. I think is what we're trying to say.
Yeah, I think it was an attempt to be responsive to comments from the committee about trying to focus on this, and if we can't do it in SABRAC, how do we, where else can we do it? So.
Right. No, that's great. And then I think that's a great addition. And then require repair information for all purchases, including electronics. That may not be available for some things now, but boy, that's a great driver. I think that's a great way to get that information out on the market. So I definitely support that. Create an enforcement mechanism for non-compliant state agents. Yeah, so then the rest of it is, but that's maybe duplicative, right?
Yeah, I think that was one that we might want to remove. I wonder if anybody else has. It seems like
yeah.
they have that process for non-compliant agencies. So
well, they want to codify their existing process, but I question whether it's enough. I guess that's the question. I think we should maybe say we should not only, we want CalRecycle to review their process, make sure it's enough to hold these agencies accountable, and then have that codified. So maybe that could be the recommendation to the legislature is they talk to CalRecycle, use them for technical assistance. But is what they're doing now enough if it's codified? And I don't know if we dug into that really deeply, but I would like to know a little bit more. But I don't want to hold things up because I think by and large this is ready to go. So maybe we can merge those. So create an enforcement mechanism. So I would say codify the established processes for non-compliant agencies if it's enough. If not, then, talk to CalRecycle about how to ensure that they have enough enforcement authority to make sure this works.
Manuel Medrano?
I was going to suggest that we add the word straighten. So straighten an enforcement mechanism. If there is already something that's already available, yet it's not strong enough to enforce, then perhaps that should be just a suggestion.
Okay. And again, these are the preliminary recommendations, so we can clarify. I think I know where you're trying to head, so we can see if we can. Okay. And again, we'll see how far we go presenting tomorrow. I think if the desire is to have a narrative around this, then we'll go back to the SABRAC annual report and try to flesh these in with their narrative. So. Okay, well let's look at the next set because now we're moving into. So we're moving away from agency side, and if you look to the left, actually you should go up, scroll up, please. we missed the second set of legislative.
Keep going up, John.
Yeah, keep going up until the left column fills. There it is. So it's actually on the buy recycle side is where we're addressing demand. Okay, for products. Okay, so it's specifically there on the buy recycle side, but we may find other things as we go. So again, we're trying to fill in the mandate that we update the state's market development plan and present the report in that structure. So these items we just talked about were on increasing demand. So now we can scroll down. So now we jump to promoting efficient local waste diversion systems, yielding high quality industrial usable feedstocks. So we heard and we discussed the carpet issues. The first two bullets are a little wonky. That's based on my experience in 5 years trying to understand the plan. I struggled every time we get an annual report to understand where we're going and even where we've been. but an annual implementation plan that clearly shows how much is anticipated to be generated, how much carpet is anticipated to be generated, the yield, which means how much they're recovering from the generated carpet in collection and processing, how much is needed to meet the goal, and I think that's what we're hearing from industry is they're not collecting enough for us. And what the end use, where does it end up by product type, by resin type, so that we know how much PET is being collected, how much PET is being generated, how much is being collected, what the yield in recovery is, where it's going. Same for nylon 6. A lot of the comments we're hearing are from the nylon end users. So, I'm not sure this is clear enough. I've been trying for 5 years to articulate it. So, but without a clear annual implementation plan, I don't know how we move forward. The second one is about a financial plan showing how the revenue is used. It's public money. CARE reports it as public money under the tax code. It's not CARE's funds. It's the California Carpet Fund. And yet it's really hard to find out where the money is going and how it's used to support the implementation with the expenditures linked to the activities, so that you know what you're getting. You don't have to tell us who specifically got the money, although that would be interesting, but what did it yield? What did they get for it? And how is it tied to the actual implementation? When you read their annual report, it's 250 pages, and you try to piece things together, it's impossible. So, Heidi?
I got actually some emails this week from concerned local governments and experts in green chemistry that they felt that they could not, they're very concerned with the CARE report that is using the fee payer money for studies of fiber from carpet, which could contain PFAS because they spray Stainmaster and some of these other products on them as water filtration devices. And that there was a study done up in Humboldt State, and they're very concerned about this, and they want to know more about what's being done with public fee money. Does CalRecycle approve these studies? And since they're done with public fee money, why can't we see the studies, and why can't we understand what's going on? And if we're concerned about it, how do we weigh in? So I think that this is a really important point that John's making here. And one of many times I've had people alert me that they're concerned about various things going on. In fact, we may hear some public comments today about this.
Yeah, so again, these are, I've tried to make it succinct. It's become a complicated program, but, I've written plans, and I have a very hard time looking at this and saying there's a plan here. I think there's money being spent, and they're trying to respond to opportunities, but, we should know every year what's going to happen. Right now, we've got nylon 6 industries telling us they can't get enough material. That shouldn't be a surprise, right? But apparently it is. And so the next two items are, so we did create a subcommittee at the last commission meeting of committee member Sanborn and myself. And I think at least the next item is to set collection goals for materials and volume to serve in-state recycling manufacturers. A lot of the fiber that does get recovered leaves California. Now we've got manufacturers in California. What are their needs? How do we serve the people who are committed to in a build facilities here in California? So the next one, ban carpet from landfill disposal. That's the more extreme measure, and tied to the second bullet, which is to collect carpet at no cost from landfills and transfer stations, including hard-to-handle reimbursement. The mattress program provides a handling fee for mattresses. Carpet is not easy to handle. If you've ever tried to move a roll of carpet, you know that, let alone a load of carpet coming into at the floor of a transfer station or landfill, and yet it's there. So it's also dirty. It's probably better collected upstream. But if we're not getting enough material, what do we do? You know, if it's going to landfills, ban it. So those are the recommendations. And Kate, we have a comment. And then
No comment. I was just reminding you of your agenda times.
Oh, okay.
No comments. Heidi, you're on mute.
You're muted.
Sorry. So the second to last one, I was thinking maybe we should suggest a date, but this program actually was passed in law in 2010. It has now been 10 years and we're still not even at 24% recycling rate for carpet. And I think banning from disposal clearly it sends the signal that we need it out of the landfill, but you have to have a full plan. So I wouldn't want to do that too soon until we actually get the last bullet implemented, which is the facilities have to get some sort of handling fee. And I think if we say it that way, because this way it says at no cost, I think it would be collect carpet or provide a reasonable handling fee to cover the reasonable costs to handle carpet and get it to recycling centers, something to that effect, because that's what we're hearing is the number one problem. It's not that they don't have carpet. 80% of it's still going in a landfill or incinerators, but they don't have at the facilities enough resources. They're not getting any help at all, just like there with the mattress program, as John pointed out, to keep it clean, pull it, keep it dry, and then ship it to a recycling facility now that we have them. And I think that should be a requirement. I can't believe CARE after all these years has not provided that because that's the easiest way to get the material to the facilities now that we have them. And it's not just nylon 6. We're hearing that they need all the carpet. They can't get enough right now. So yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so let's work on this. And Kate, thank you for reminding me. I meant to say on the agenda that this is actually in response to comments that we received earlier, as is the next couple of items. So that's where we should be on the agenda. And I even though it's in the recommendations, these are recommendations in response to the prior comments. But we're actually at the point on the agenda of talking about data review and requests, and then we've set our meeting schedule, but whether there are agenda items for future meetings. So let's bring those up, and if we have time, we can return to the recommendations and try to continue working through them. So are there data requests based on either what we've discussed today or what you'd like to discuss going forward? I heard some, we do want some additional information on that SABRAC link on enforcement, but I think I'm not sure we need to devote agenda time to that. I think I can probably follow up with CalRecycle staff.
Also, Chair, to follow up, there were 2 data requests made at the last meeting. Those are still in the works. I might reach out for a little more additional information. One was from Commissioner and Chair Sanborn about if some of the RMDZ recommendations, I believe, were legislative or like administrative. So I will check back in on that. Apologies, I do not have that today. Hopefully I can provide an update tomorrow. And then Commissioner Medrano wanted some more information on organics permitting. So I may need, need a little more information on that probably, but I can follow up with that. So apologies on our side.
Okay. Any requests based on our discussion or what you anticipate going forward? Good. Okay. Now what, Ron?
This is more of a consult for the rest of the committee. Do we want to hear on import, export, mainly export data what materials leaving the state? Is this something that the group will be interested in, or?
What materials? Everything?
Plastics, mainly plastics. We talked about paper already, but in general, just all recyclables that folks put in their blue carts and bins.
I think Commissioner Dell has collected a lot of data on that, and I think she's presenting it tomorrow. So maybe we should wait to hear, but my understanding is she's tracked almost everything and where it's going. And there's a lot going overseas on plastics.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think we had, in fact, was it Kate that you gave a presentation at one of the early commission meetings on?
It was like the first one, yeah.
Yeah.
So if, based on, I guess what Commissioner Dell presents tomorrow, if there's still outstanding requests tied to this, we can chat about that, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we need a dive into carpet. You know, Committee Member Medrano and I were both on the first CARE committee. I was on Cal Recycles committee as well. Committee Member Sanborn's been involved from the beginning with the legislation and the implementation. We've had a number of comments from people, but I think we just went through at least an initial set of recommendations. So I suspect as we get these recommendations out in a form that people can review, we may have a desire to talk with people and get their specific recommendations, which, you know, I think the new process tells us we should be doing, consulting with stakeholders and getting their feedback, but we are getting things as we go forward. So if anybody has ideas for future presentation, now's the time to bring them up. If not, we'll continue working on the recommendations we brought forward. Heidi?
The only thing I can think of is we have had suggestions that we should consider all flooring types, not just the carpet. LVT, as you know, these vinyl floorings, they basically have no recycling system at all. They're not recyclable. They've got toxics in them. And well, there's some vinyl floors that do have recycling closed loop systems, and then the wood looking ones, I guess, don't. So maybe getting a little more information about that, because if we're going to add all flooring types that are not natural wood to a, you know, program, that's a big thing, and we would need more information, I think, before we made a call like that. That might be a longer term for the next July recommendations, but maybe we could get some more data, or people, if you're out there that would like to send us information about the LVT flooring and what it's made out of and how many people are recycling it and how much is out there, or if Cal Recycle has anything like that that's easy to grab out of the characterization study, for example, that would be good to know.
Yeah, and that's actually the next bulleted item on the recommendations. So I think, yeah, I mean, I'm always puzzled by vinyl. So it probably is a worthy discussion. I think we received some information, I think, from the ISRI presentation. I think he followed up and shared some information about a vinyl project. So do you want to try to include that on a future agenda? Learn more about vinyl?
I know there's a vinyl working group on, I think, under ACC, and they are trying to increase the recycling of vinyl in general. But then there's just the flooring, and this is, to me, related to carpet, because one of the inequities has been, why just carpet? Why not the vinyl flooring, and why not these other flooring types that they're competing against, which is a valid question. So I just, anybody in the vinyl flooring industry that wants to give us data, we'd sure like to hear it.
Well, there's other flooring. There's wood, there's linoleum, you know, and there's a variety of flooring. So, yeah, let's see. If I'll take that on and see if I can find someone either for one of our subsequent meetings and get a balanced presentation. Find out who, you know, who would be best to give us that overview of their industry. Okay, I will do that. So let's on the bullet here, Kate, on the vinyl LVT flooring. Let's just make a note for find a presentation to organize a committee presentation. Great. The next two items are, again, comments that we received. These are from Michael Gross. And CBES. One would be to recommend minimum recycled content for engineered wood products sold in California, to help with dimensional lumber recovery that's ongoing with few outlets for use. So again, we could probably get some more details from Michael or get a lead. I'm not sure how that industry actually is organized at all. Very, very specific, focused recommendation, as was his recommendation for Caltrans to do pilot projects using asphalt shingles. I've heard about discussions with Caltrans over the years just on something as basic as rubberized asphalt, and so I imagine this sounds simpler than it actually is. So these again, two items that Michael Gross brought forward, and the recommendations were pretty straightforward from his email. So I'm not sure whether we want to take it up, or is this along the lines of the vinyl flooring where we need to do more digging on both of these.
Yeah, I think we need to ask both of these industry groups to present us with what they are doing to include recycled content dimensional lumber, if anything, or what they, and then the same with asphalt shingles, like what are they doing for recycled content and what are they doing for closing the loop? Let them tell us as industries, what are you doing? And then we can go from there, because if what we get is not much or not planning on it, then that tells us a whole bunch. But we should find out who's out there and at least make them aware that we want to know if they are doing something, and then figure out how to talk to them about where we can go, because those are problem products that we need to deal with.
So I guess, Kate, the note here would be the same for both. Let's do some industry research on that. If anybody wants to volunteer for that, or for one or the other, I'd be glad to entertain that. Sarah?
Yeah, I'll look into it. I can, sure. I
For both
do
of
have
them.
a comment as well.
Yeah.
I think that if we're talking about market development, that minimum content requirements are just a blanket important part of market development, and it might be a little easier to have like a minimum content requirements overall, and then have the more difficult or materials kind of listed under that. Glass, of course, is simple. Just instead of taking it piece by piece for each one, I like to put it under an umbrella of minimum content requirements, and then list them under there, and just do it that way, as far as, because there'll be other things that are difficult. A lot of things are going to come up one by one, so maybe we just group them under minimum content, because that's great for market development, and then these are the more specific things we're looking at.
So, yeah, okay, let's put this in. The next one is minimum content for glass products, but
Yeah, so at the very top, just put minimum content requirements at the top of this, and then
right.
and then I'll figure out how to put it together when I look into this. Okay.
Just make a note, minimum content,
Yeah.
starting at lumber or everything.
Or start at the vinyl. Yeah, above vinyl.
Yeah.
Oh, it could be interesting for carpet. See that one.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then I'll work it from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the experiences in that drives a lot of innovation.
Yeah, I don't want to leave anything
Particularly
out.
when you
This way it
find,
kind of captures everything.
yeah, when you find industries that are already committed to it, then we can help them achieve that goal. So, all right, yeah, interesting. This would be, I think, an ongoing focus.
Chair, we have two
So
pretty
let's-
short public comments if you wanted to do those now or if you wanted to wait.
Yeah, sure, please, go ahead.
One was from Randy Pollock at Randy Pollock. CARE currently provides a stewardship, this was subject carpet, apologies. His comment is, CARE currently provides a stewardship plan and annual report and has an advisory committee. If you have concerns about the program, why don't you ask CARE for a presentation? And then a second comment from Gail Bryce with XT Green. Before finalizing decisions regarding carpet, please consider my comment submitted today. And that was her comment that we covered in agenda item 2 that has been published. I can also send that out to the committee directly after this meeting. And those are the 2 public comments.
Yeah, and I suspect we'll continue to refine any recommendations. And we'll just, I think how that fits in, we're not sending anything immediately to the commission, so we'll bring these back wrapped with narrative as we go forward, and even when it gets to the commission, they can be modified, and until we finish in June now, we can continue to update recommendations and improvements. We're starting the process. So let's see what else we're getting near the end. Yeah, so minimum content requirements for glass. I heard, I think the minimum content requirement for glass beverage containers is for those sold, or I'm sorry, manufactured in California. So if the glass bottle is manufactured elsewhere, it need not have minimum content requirements. So it would be good to let's clarify this. I did not have a chance. I didn't think we were going to get this far today, so I didn't have a chance to look at the statute. But let me clarify this and bring it back. But it certainly makes sense that it should not just be for glass manufactured, although that probably helps with the wine industry. But there are containers that are manufactured elsewhere and sold in California, and why not extend that coverage to them? And then what's the enforcement? Who is checking on glass? Glass has been out there for a long time, and I think it's probably along the lines of what we talked about on minimum content requirement that it may have some room for improvement. But these were 2 items that I heard and added to the list because they seem to require our attention. So the next one, there have been discussion about what this item on number 4 on the left, part of the market development plan to promote the competitive collection and use of secondary waste materials. I suspect it goes back to issues that were very hot issues at the time the statute was adopted in the early 90s. And it had to do with what's called flow control. Some of us might remember a big case, U.S. Supreme Court case called Carbone that struck down a town trying to direct all material to facilities that the town owned. And the Supreme Court said you can't do that. You can negotiate agreements, but you can't tell someone they must deliver material to your facility. And then in California, we had the Rancho Mirage versus Waste Management, Palm Springs Recycling, and Rancho Mirage City and Waste Management in the Desert versus Palm Springs Recycling. That was determined that any generator of material can sell or donate their material. It's become a landmark for California. So I have to think that this competitive collection was mixed up in those issues about who had the ability to control the flow of material. And so this would be a legislative recommendation to replace competitive with the efficient collection. When I went back and read the report that CalRecycle did in 1993, they danced around it. There was no discussion about collection per se. I think it had to do with the flow of material through the supply chain. So, but that term is ambiguous. If it gives people a problem, we should try to fix it. So, Ann Schneider.
Hi, John. To go backwards, under glass, you're talking about minimum content requirements, but the other problem was how AB 2020 gets in the way of reuse of glass, reuse of bottles on there. And I don't know quite how to word that, but the commingled rate, I think, was the final straw for reusable bottles on that, how the commingled rate is right now. And then back to Rancho Mirage, it was also the discussion of negative values and ownership of products that had a negative value. When I've listened into the recycling committee, I know that some of the commissioners talk about, well, there's no value to these materials, but if their negative value is still greater than the cost of disposal, there is still value to that material. And that's, I was commercial recycling back then, and that was a big issue for us, was negative value materials.
Right. Yeah.
So we should look at where there are barriers to, just because something has a negative value, that it doesn't create a barrier for reuse or recycling. And I had my hand up a while. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, I've always been intrigued. I mean, it's a negative value of value, right?
To me, a negative value is a value if it's greater than, if it's more valuable than what it would cost to landfill. Yeah. And then if you throw in the greenhouse gas component of it, if it's better to develop that market for a negative value than to landfill it where it might become a fugitive gas emission, there's another wrinkle there.
Right.
Well, and my only other question is, when you were talking about data, is textiles. I haven't heard the recycling committee talk about textiles, but I've missed a few of their calls.
So let's do a couple of things on the glass side. Kate, why don't you put a note on CRV on refillables? I thought we had something, maybe I'm getting jumbled, but I thought we had something to look at that. Maybe at the subcommittee, I think we had that, and it may not have made it on the list. So we need to find out how refillables are impacted by CRV. Do you have to charge 10 cents every time you send one out? I don't know the answer, but we should find out. And,
I know. There's been a big issue with refillables, and Conscious Container identified it, because the way the CRV program works now, they literally have to break the glass and crush it to get the redemption instead of allowing it to be refilled. So this, to me, is a very big thing on glass, and getting back to reuse and getting back to where we were when I was growing up, when I got my Coca-Cola in a wood crate at the gas station, and then we'd bring it back and get a whole nother crate refilled. And we didn't have any of this waste or litter. It was a totally different world. So we need to change the program, and that's, to me, should come up under the recycling committee under the CRV program. So we can ask that they bring that up, but we could keep an eye on it from the market side. But I think really the recycling committee should handle it if they can.
Yeah, so let's have a placeholder on that one.
John, can I also add, in California, the wineries have really changed their bottles greatly for shelf advertising, but in other countries, they have stabilized wine bottle designs so that maximizes the reusability of a wine bottle. Here we have so much differentiation, but it's just other countries are doing it differently.
Other countries have EPR, and the producers are required to do standardization of glass. They're doing that in Canada on beer, They're doing that in Europe on wine. They're doing it for sodas because if you have the same glass and you just slap a different label on it, you can reuse it. Everybody can reuse it. So that reuse thing has really got to get addressed by this commission because we've completely gotten away from it in the United States. When I was growing up, that's all it was. So we've gone away from reuse. And but I still think the CRV program needs to be addressing this first for the CRV program, but then we could talk broader about wine and other things too.
Okay, so let's add another bullet there, standardization for reuse under the glass discussion. We're getting near the end of our meeting, so I don't want to move on to any new items. Anne, you had one other point real quickly that I
textiles.
Yeah,
I'm
textiles.
sorry, the citizenship hearing took longer.
Yeah.
Textiles, and I haven't heard the recycling committee talk about textiles, but there's a whole reuse infrastructure for textiles as well as rag industry, et cetera, et cetera. So I just
through today, and then give a presentation tomorrow. I'm going to focus the presentation tomorrow on the narrative that we looked at the beginning of the meeting today, the Cali PA permitting and the GoBiz set of records.
That one's pretty darn close to being done, don't you?
Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It won't have the narrative. It'll just be the recommendations. I'm not going to have time to write narrative between now and tomorrow, but at least what we're doing tomorrow, I think, is showing them where we are, but they're not going to be prepared. And we're not asking for an action. That could come, though, at a subsequent meeting if we do that. So use a subcommittee time for that. Okay. Well, it's 2 minutes to go. Anybody have last thoughts for this? Yeah, we are almost near the end of the bulleted recommendations. So I think that should make everybody, there were 67 of them when we started. I think we maybe have more now, but we're definitely making progress, and I look forward to our next meeting. We'll try to work through the last of the bulleted items and refine narrative and keep pushing this thing forward, and maybe take one or two of our upcoming meetings off the agenda. So we'll talk about that later.
So yeah, our next meeting's on the 19th, correct? From 9 to 12?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we go to Mondays going forward. Today was the exception to meet the 10-day notice, so everything is on Mondays going forward.
And I would encourage, if we can get our work done for the January 1st report before other committees that are going to come behind us, that would only help the whole commission move everything January 1st that we can move. So that would be a good thing to try and shoot for.
Yeah, I hope we're pretty close. I think it's just a matter of allowing the public to review what we have and making sure we're not moving too rapidly. So different situation. Great. Thanks, everybody.
Okay,
See you next
thanks.
time. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow.
Yeah.